Good afternoon. I'm Steve Stambaugh. I'm a graduate student in political science and member of the World Affairs Institute. I'm going to introduce today's speaker. Before we get into today's lecture, I want to remind everybody that tonight at 8 p.m. in the South Ballroom, Andrei Cordescu is going to be speaking about writing without the enemy. And tomorrow at 12 noon here in the Pioneer Room, G.V. Menzelin will talk about environmental conditions in Eastern Europe and the USSR. Today I would like to introduce Ivana Czeskowicz. She has been a member of the Polish Solidarity Movement since 1980 and went underground as martial law was imposed. She was imprisoned for 3 years. She was sentenced for 3 years in prison, served 1 year of forced labor, and was released after that during a general amnesty. She is currently involved in the Solidarity Movement. Her education includes a degree in theater, and she is now studying economics and is working on studying labor and economic changes in Poland. One of the main topics she'll be talking about today is the prospects for capitalism in the emerging Poland. And with that, I would like to introduce to you Ivana Czeskowicz.
I would like to thank you very much for inviting me here and to say my big sorry for my awful English. I will try to be as clear as I am able to do it. Polish way to democracy, I think that it can be called a path of a shame and a path of a hope. Around 10 years ago, in 1980, labor movement in Poland organized itself in an independent trade union, which was absolutely against the government, absolutely against bureaucracy leading that country. A path of hope. People believed at that time that they are able to move history by their own hands, and they are able to change the system. They are able to go towards democracy using instruments they have, which means the organization, their own minds. That's what was existing in Poland. Even myself, I remember that the air this time was colorful, tasty. People were very open. Life was very colorful. You could see in romantic movies. And then martial law. Martial law was introduced by bureaucracy in 1981, basically because workers started to organize themselves in a kind of classical workers' councils. Polish national economy, Polish economy is nationalized in around 90%. Inside the factories, all employees were to elect kind of body. And that body was able to, for example, fire the manager if they didn't like the manager. They were able to control all the financial side of production. Wages, trade, investments, and because of that, they were very dangerous. They were able to they had real measures to fight against bureaucracy. Half a year after deciding that they will introduce the project of self-managed republic to Poland, Jaruzelski, as a leader of bureaucracy, introduced martial law to Poland. But that hope, the path of hope, hasn't been changed. When people, masses of people, when they see that they can really act and they can really keep history in their own hands, it's not easy to stop them through using police, army, or any kind of physical pressure. There had been some people who had been killed during the martial law. There had been thousands and thousands who had been imprisoned. There had been many people who lose their health being in jail. But the determination of the society was so strong that 10 years later, last year, Stalinist regime, after next big wave of strikes, had to start negotiations, and we had so-called round table agreement in between leadership of democratic opposition and bureaucracy. Bureaucracy decided to give kind of partial free elections to Poland. 30% of seats to the parliament could be elected freely. The rest of them still is kept by Stalinists. But that beginning started all these changes you could see inside Eastern Bloc. Germany, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, even revolution in Romania somehow started from that roundtable agreement. I'm saying path of shame. Why? Because those that leadership of democratic opposition was very broad. Solidarity was not only a trade union, but also it was kind of movement, including every kind of political opinion you could imagine. So there were representatives of workers as well as representatives of small business who were absolutely against freedom of labor or workers' councils. But during the time when they were opposing Stalinist period, they were able to stay together within one organization. Now it looks that it starts to be, the situation is absolutely different. Our government is introducing a program of International Monetary Fund. The main advisor of that IMF, Mr. Sachs, he had great success in Bolivia, in Latin America. He gave some advices to Venezuela, and of course economically it's been really great success. And after this big success, he moved to London to give some advices to Eastern Bloc in order to achieve the same big success in Eastern Bloc. The reforms of Mr. Sachs are quite close in its effects as in Latin America. They are typically monetarian ones, which means that the government was able to stop the inflation, but it's been not able to stop the decline in production. During the last half a year, the production declined in 30%, which is already a snowball effect. There is not enough commodities to sell in order to buy raw materials, in order to produce, so there is again drop in production. It goes like that. In some of sectors of our economy, like transportation, the drop in transportation is even 60%. So it's very, very big. But there is also equality in that collapse of economy. IMF expected that some of the factories will go bankrupt when some, which are better, will be able to stay within new realities. There is no bankruptcies in Poland. The decline is very equal. Everybody more poor than they were before, but nobody is especially poor comparing to the rest of them, which is kind of, it's been not that what Mr. Sachs expected. About privatization, this is also the next problem IMF and our government today face. There were expectations today we will have we were expected to have around 20% of private industry, and we have none. The problem is that it's very difficult to privatize it. Firstly, one of the ideas was because still there is no typical bourgeoisie in Poland, it's only working class employees. So there was the idea that some of privatization might go through workers' shareholding. But the problem is that workers refuse to pay for it. They say, why? This is national industry, which means ours, so why should we pay to ourselves in order to receive shares to the industry which is already ours? And so this project failed. Next project, they were expecting a big inflow of capital from outside, big investments from outside. It doesn't seem that it will happen for several reasons. Firstly, because this is not only Poland, but many more Eastern European countries which try to give hands like that in order to have some money. And Poland is not the most attractive country, especially that this is the only one country in Eastern Bloc which has very well organized and very militant and used to struggling working class. So capital is going somewhere else, to Hungary, to Czechoslovakia, to Soviet Union, not to Poland. Next problem is that even workers themselves refuse, there are already some examples, workers refuse selling their own national property to somebody outside. They say, if it is all of ours, if 45 millions of Poles have the national economy, why should we sell it to somebody else, and who will get money then? So again, there is next problem. There was already strike in a factory of airplanes. One businessman from Western Germany wanted to buy it, and the management agreed, and Solidarity Committee agreed. Where workers fired both management and Solidarity Committee from the factory, and they organized strike against privatization of the factory. Finally, in the Polish newspapers, you could read big titles: "They choose misery." Then, problem of bureaucracy and state apparatus itself. Probably you have heard a lot about privatization which is going on in Poland. As far as I see it from inside Poland, there is quick and dynamic bureaucratization of Poland going on. Our state apparatus during the last year and a half doubled itself. I think that US economy would collapse in such situation, and also I didn't expect that there is a possibility my country will be more bureaucratized as it's been before. It is possible. Those credits, those loans Poland received were spent on new jobs for people who work for the state, for bureaucracy itself. So this is one thing. The second thing is that the most active economically group in Poland is bureaucracy itself, because these are, especially top of bureaucracy, these are the only one people who have money in there. Top level of bureaucracy, nomenclatura, is trying to turn into private entrepreneurs, the same as you can see on the West. For example, former member of government of last Stalinist government, Mr. Wilczek. In English, his name could be translated as a small wolf. He's quite big wolf because he's the richest person in Poland today. The middle stratas of bureaucracy include people who haven't got money, private money enough to turn themselves into private businessmen. Anyway, it's not profitable because taxes are monetary policy is very restrictive, taxes are very high, and it's not useful to be private entrepreneur. Much better is to have something strange. It is kind of group ownership. I will show on the example. There is a former Stalinist organization, youth organization, Juventus. It has, as every Stalinist organization, it has had huge bureaucratic apparatus. they have no members anymore, but that apparatus exists, and they have money they saved during that 45 years. Last year, they have bought the biggest, the most expensive restaurant, hotel, and several night bars in Wrocław as an organization. They employed a manager, and the manager is passing profits to the organization. Then your share in a share of single bureaucrat in that capital depends on his position inside the apparatus, not on shares, but on how he is, how on basically on how does he work within the organization, sometimes on the corruption, on speculation, on contacts in between that organization and the state. It's very complicated. It's so complicated that people from outside are not able to manage inside Poland. For example, there was Barbara Piasecka-Johnson, American multimillionaire who came to Poland in order to buy a shipyard, that famous shipyard in which Solidarity started. She spent, some people say that she says sometimes that she spent $7 million, sometimes she says that she spent $30 million on experts, economic experts who were trying to check the value of mechanical equipment in this shipyard. She failed. She was not able to buy the shipyard for two reasons. First reason was the workers wanted to have the same wages as in the US. And the second reason is that her experts have found that in the meantime, when she started negotiations, small nomenclatura ventures bought around 60% of all the shipyard. So the rest of the shipyard is out of value. Nobody would buy it. And that what is now in this shipyard is neither private ownership, because these are bought by organizations, nor national ownership. It's something new which is going on in Poland. Then she was traveling all over Poland for a year trying to buy something. Doesn't matter what, something, and she failed. After a year of traveling all over Poland and asking people if they want to sell something to her, with those millions of dollars, she decided to go back to the US. She was not able to manage there. It's been absolutely different system. Then another problem is our farmers. Our agriculture is privatized. Everybody expected that if there will be introduction of capitalism to Poland, this will be farmers who will support the idea. And it's exactly opposite. Actually, farmers are organized in the biggest political party in Poland, and they already decided to stop the support to our government, and they want to have socialism in Poland. The main slogan they use is that Stalinists were trying to destroy them for the last 45 years, and they were not able to do it. Now, market, especially Western pressure put on Poland, is going to destroy them, and they want to oppose it. They organized already 2 national strikes, and they won these strikes. So, in this point, the IMF program failed too. Unemployment. They wanted to introduce unemployment and to organize big restructurization of our mining. Workers did strike in mining district last year. They won the strike. There is no unemployment introduced there is no restructurization of mining in Poland up to now. IMF sent 1 month ago warnings to our government saying that up to now they don't see real changes inside Poland, or they see some changes, but not necessarily they go towards capitalism. Sometimes they go quite opposite directions. So Especially that the last thing I want to say is about the attitude to the reforms from below. You can hear from the newspapers of enthusiastic speeches of our government, the government of Mr. Klaus or Mr. Shatali, that famous 500 economic plan, but you don't hear so much about reactions from below. And it can be important because still Solidarity is the biggest organization in all Eastern Bloc. So that reaction might be very important. You haven't heard, for example, about strikes, which has been during the last year, pretty big strikes. You can be interested mainly, basically, for example, as a student, by students' national strike in Poland. They were going to privatize our education, what it means. Up to today, our education is absolutely for free from the beginning till doctorate. And students have rights to receive scholarship, which is enough to pay for dormitory, for food and some basic needs. And the government was trying in June this year to cut part of these scholarships. Students organized strike, and they were very unhappy because they were going to make really big strike. And in the evening, the same day, the Ministry of Education made a speech in the TV saying that he's sorry, there's been misunderstanding. He of course didn't mean that he wants to cut anything, any kind of social service, and he wanted just to put new taxes on the factories. And then he had some problems with the factories, and then he almost resigned. This been third time he had kind of votum separatum from the society, and probably next time will be his last one. Then there had been strikes of railway workers. These workers' councils, which started in Solidarity 80-81, they were not able to be active during the martial law just because if somebody wants to deal with economics, at least it has that such people have to have kind of possibilities of checking datas, concrete datas. It's been impossible during Stalinist system. Now they can do it. And workers from railway self-management, prepared program of restructurization of transport in Poland. IMF program was, as you can expect, absolutely different. Finally, railway workers organized a strike last year. They won the strike. And now this is program of self-management, which is introduced into Poland, of transportation. The same is going on in mining district. This is miners project of restructurization, which starts to be introduced to mining district. Also, Workers' Council started to organize themselves again in the same way they were trying to organize themselves before the martial law. They started from 224 factories a year and a half ago. Now almost every Workers' Council has representatives in kind of network, national network of Workers' Councils, and they are dealing with problems of economy. In general, in June, in the last session of the parliament, they said they opposed the government. They opposed the IMF program to Poland. They are going to prepare their own program, economic program, and they're going to run their own candidates to the next parliamentarian elections. Of course, that program is based on the program of Solidarity 80-81, which is quite leftist. This is something which is very hopeful. a lot of hope. I'm leftist, so I'm putting a lot of hope in that program. But also, this is something which is very, very dangerous. The shame, lack of hope. Always, as far as you can see in modern history of Europe, when there is a great crisis, always people are they are lost, they are confused. This is kind of social base for authoritarian developments in these countries. And Polish democracy, as far as democracy in another Eastern European countries, is not stable yet. I can see that not only in Poland, but in every of Eastern European countries, there is very dynamic growth of nationalistic, anti-Semitic, chauvinistic currents, which were trying to link this kind of religious fundamentalism, which is trying to link very, very fundamentalist Catholicism. Somehow it is close to Iran Muslim fundamentalism. So Catholic fundamentalism, the attack of secular state, the idea of secular state, and linked with fight for self-defense of workers. So, for example, Catholicism, anti-Semitism, and self-defense, corporationism, all together. The symbol of that current is our leader of our church hierarchy, Cardinal Glemp. Maybe some of you have heard about his anti-Semitic speech last year around monastery it's been never mind. He had very anti-Semitic speech. He went also to Paris. In Paris, there is a part of the city called Vendée. During the Second War, citizens of Vendée did pogrom of Jewish people in there, and up to now, all citizens of Paris are very ashamed of it. And Cardinal Glemp went straight there, and in a church in there, he said that he is very proud about great traditions of Vendée. So it's been a great scandal in France at that time. But it is somehow linked. In Soviet Union there is Pamięć. In Yugoslavia this is Milosevic, kind of neo-Stalinist current plus fundamentalism plus nationalism plus kind of strange mixture. And the attack of enlightenment against secular state. Well, so really last sentence, we now have two possibilities, either democracy in Eastern Bloc and development, I don't know where we will find ourselves in the future. And this will have great impact on all Europe. It won't stop. I don't think that these changes will stop inside Eastern Bloc or authoritarian kind of bad, not democratic states inside Eastern Europe. And this will also have big impact on the West. This is middle of Europe. That's it. All the political parties today, probably you can put into three buses altogether, all membership from left to the right. The problem is that after 45 years of Stalinist monoparty state system, people just very afraid of parties. But we have several organizations, and I think that from Now there will be development towards politicization of society. We have Freedom and Peace Movement, which has been organized in '86 and which was playing a big role in strikes, in the last wave of strikes, which broke the Stalinism in '88. We have Green Party, Green Federation of Greens. We have anarchists. The most popular political tendency in Poland among youth is actually anarchism. All of them are reading Bakunin, and also they read Marx, which is not, probably you would be surprised because that's not information you can read in newspapers in here, but they read Marx. They say that capitalism, especially in poor countries, doesn't give hope, and the only one proposal of the West for poor countries is starve and work, and they don't like it. Then there are some interesting currents which are coming from Solidarity. Firstly, this is left wing of Solidarity itself. They try to oppose that anti-abortion bill, which was the attack of women, which is led by some of members of the parliament, our actual parliament. There is Women's Commission based on national scale, members of Solidarity, and there is also a network of self-managements, very powerful, and because the economy is nationalized, they have really decisive voice. They can have decisive voice in changes inside Poland. I think that hope is lying in the young generation, not generation of martial law. Those people, I mean, my generation is tired. It's time for students.
Can you talk about the situation
Of women? Well, this is linked with that fundamentalist current I said. Poland is very Catholic, but not necessarily Catholic is to play such regressive role as it is doing today. And it's divided. There are two wings inside Catholic Church. One wing is very fundamentalist. It's around Cardinal Glemp. They try to introduce anti-abortion bill. We have freedom of abortion today. They are going to introduce it to Poland through prisons for doctors who do that abortion. And also during the parliamentarian debate about it, one of MPs, fundamentalist MPs, gave a proposal that women who did abortion to themselves, they would have kind of forced labor. I know that idea from my own past, so it's been kind of not new idea, but he had immediate response from another fundamentalist who said, well, this bad idea, we are going to introduce unemployment to Poland, and if women will work for free, then men won't have jobs. So it shows kind of attack. It's very, very strong. Walesa says that women can serve tea in the government. Mazowiecki, anyway, the most important place taken by women in his government is a spokesman who has a piece of a paper and she can read, and she's beautiful.
You said that the factories are run by the councils. Supposing you got a factory which is not producing or self-sustaining, who is giving them the money to continue in the...
Well, this is a good question. I think that nobody knows in Poland. The economy is really very, very different than here. In order to have to run the factory in reality, one have to know how much things costs. I mean, for example, machines inside the factory. You have to have experts who make all the list of everything which is inside the factory, and they decide how much does it cost, and this hasn't been done up to now. The data about, for example, Barbara Piaseczka-Johnson was not able to buy anything because nobody knew how much do this factory costs. So people take data from the air, and still the style hasn't been changed. So anyway, workers' councils sometimes are better than managements because they have kind of, they care about security of people more than management. And so they try to produce something at least, and management is not interested in it.
Well, the government hasn't got the money, and the factory runs a deficit. Who is giving the money to continue running productive enterprise? Where
But
is this
all
money coming
Polish-
from?
It depends what you call unproductive. All Polish economy, every Polish factory is not competitive, comparing to that what you have on the West. All. So it is not like that you shift money from here and put there. It is just not competitive with the Western market. But still, all the industry and all the production, and people may often forgot about it, was organized within Eastern Bloc. Part of production in Czechoslovakia, part in Soviet Union, some in Yugoslavia or somewhere else. Up to 80% of production was done within Eastern European Bloc in the way of exchange. And it's another system. There is one system here and another system there, and it works. Still, it works. For example, in Eastern Germany was unified. Now we have one beautiful Germany, but the factories are not competitive as well as Polish factories are not competitive. This is first problem. Second, you have to have sources of energy and network of, for example, to put gas into the country, gasoline. And all of that is linked to the Eastern Bloc. They have no links, Eastern Germany, with Western part of Germany. They have none. They have to use the same sources as they have been. Eastern part of Germany has to use Soviet Union resources. They are not able to develop in a short time links with Western part Germany. Then they are not able to compete with all these factories. Official data say that all of that must be closed. So this means 15 million of people who have nothing to do inside Germany. Impossible. I mean, they will have revolution the next day. So what they do is they try to keep the system. Eastern Germany is to continue trade with Poland, with Czechoslovakia, with Soviet Union for a long, long time. They will produce things and sell it to Soviet Union in order to receive oil. And it works.
Who is that point you just made? Who are you selling to? Who is Poland selling anything that's manufactured in a factory there? Is it all going to Eastern Bloc countries still? Is there no Western market coming in to buy your product?
It depends. Our light industry, especially our light industry, is quite good. So we have people, Western Europe are coming here. And the problem is that this is Western Europe which makes blockade on our products, even if they are very good. For example, food. We have very good food, actually, but it is 2-3 times cheaper than in Western Europe. And it's been a big pressure put on our government because we keep our borders open for every Western tourist without visas. They can come without visas. So they are just coming and buying kind of wagons of food and taking back to the West. This means that already in France there had been some strikes of farmers. And it will be the same in especially Western Germany, etc. So we are not able to sell it, not because sometimes, not because we are not competitive, but because it will destroy markets in the West.
Yes, could you comment on the relative strengths and positions of the candidates in your presidential election?
There are two main candidates. One of them is Mazowiecki, and second one is Walesa. Mazowiecki, he is a professor, academic, intellectual. He and his political group have all the mass media in their hands. They have radio, TV. Radio and TV is absolutely nationalized up to now, in hands of the state. And in the law there is that they can be controlled by the government only. Still, the law hasn't been changed. And they have newspapers, and they made a big propaganda about. It's very difficult to understand how Mr. Mazowiecki can describe himself or can be seen as a leftist when he is introducing the most restrictive economic program to Poland. How he can be described as somebody who is so civilized when farmers organized their first strike, he immediately sent police against them. And only presence of Walesa, who went there in order to defend those guys, they will be beaten up. He already decided to arrest that. They arrested some members of parliament without permission of the parliament, which is absolutely not democratic. Then they decided to introduce religion to the school, not through the parliament or debate about it in the parliament, but just through the order from Ministry of Education sent to the schools, which is absolutely the same method we know already. They decided to there is more difficult to get divorced in Poland because they limited the numbers of courts which can work on such cases. So now people have to wait for a long time before they get divorced. All of that has been done through personal, individual decisions instead of debates in the parliament. On the other hand, there is Walesa. The problem is that he has the same economic program. He also wants to introduce IMF program into Poland, which means also the attack on the standards of living of people in there. But his problem is that he's a worker, and he's the only one social base is workers. He depends on solidarity and on workers, on labor movement much more than Mazowiecki. And because of that, he's more he responds to people much more than Mazowiecki. Mazowiecki is looking for in another spheres of our society. And I think that Walesa will win.
Would you comment on the accuracy of the Western press in describing events in Poland?
Western press, I don't think Walesa, he wants to introduce he wants to have capitalism in Poland. But he's also a worker, and this is a next time when a worker takes the power in the country, and he says not necessarily he behaves as a capitalist. For example, lately, when Mazowiecki was trying to explain him that standards of living in Poland are declined because they are so busy in the parliament on writing laws, Walesa said that workers, there was a moment in Poland when workers did like that and the government was changed, and now they can do like that again. It's absolutely, it doesn't work for reforms. for pro-capitalist reforms, pro-IMF reforms in this sense. And the second story is that also for example, they say that Walesa is anti-Semitic or nationalistic, but he was the only one official person in Poland who organized special meeting of solidarity, represent different currents of solidarity in order to write a letter that solidarity or movements which are coming from solidarity will oppose any kind of authoritarian, anti-Semitic and nationalistic movement in there. Mazowiecki didn't do it. He didn't say, up to now, nobody from his group made an official statement that he is against it. They describe Walesa as anti-Semitic, but, for example, they sent their representatives to Cardinal Gleim